I never believed in the old stories, the legends of the Cherokee people. I used to think they were just tales to scare children, to keep them from wandering too far into the woods. But now I know they were more than stories. They were warnings. Warnings I should have heeded. It started last summer. I was on a solo camping trip, deep in the forests of the Smoky Mountains, land long known as Cherokee territory. I thought I'd find peace there, away from the city, away from the noise. And for the first few days, I did. The woods felt like a sanctuary, a place where time moved slower. The air was fresh, the sounds of nature were calming, and I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't experienced in years. That peace lulled me into a false sense of security. On the third night, things changed. I was sitting by the campfire, watching the flames dance against the growing darkness. It was one of those moments where everything suddenly felt off. The forest, usually alive with the chatter of insects and the occasional rustle of leaves, had fallen silent. Not a single sound. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath. That's when I heard it, faint at first, like a soft whisper carried on the breeze. I dismissed it as the wind, but the sound grew louder, more distinct. It wasn't just a whisper, it was a voice, and it was speaking in a language I didn't understand. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt an irrational fear rise up inside me, like a primal instinct screaming at me to leave. I stood up, shining my flashlight into the trees, but there was nothing, only darkness. I tried to brush it off, to convince myself it was just the wind playing tricks on me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I doused the fire and crawled into my tent, hoping that sleep would bring some relief. But sleep didn't come easy. The whispering continued, circling around my tent, growing more insistent, and then I heard laughter, a low, guttural laugh that sent chills down my spine. I held my breath, clutching the knife I kept by my sleeping bag. The laughter faded, but the whispers remained, eventually lulling me into a fitful sleep. When I woke up the next morning, the first thing I noticed was the claw marks on the tree just outside my tent. 4 deep, parallel gouges running vertically down the bark, fresh and glistening with sap. My stomach twisted into knots. Bears, I thought. It had to be a bear. But as I studied the marks, something about them felt wrong. They were too clean, too precise, almost as if carved by something with intelligence. Shaking off the unease, I packed up and set off for a hike, hoping to clear my head. But as I moved deeper into the forest, the feeling of being watched returned. I would catch glimpses of shadows moving just at the edge of my vision, but whenever I turned to look, there was nothing there. The forest around me felt heavy, oppressive, as if the trees were pressing in, cutting off my escape routes. The whispering voices returned, drifting through the air like a sinister breeze. I stopped to listen, straining to make out the words, but they were too distorted, like a broken radio signal. I quickened my pace, every instinct in me screaming to leave, to get out of those woods. But no matter how fast I walked, the voices followed. By the time I made it back to camp, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the forest floor. I built a fire and sat close to it, feeling its warmth and light as a small comfort against the encroaching darkness. But as night fell, the forest seemed to come alive again, not with the sounds of nature, but with a strange, unsettling energy. The laughter returned, echoing from deep within the woods. I gripped my knife, staring into the darkness beyond the firelight. That's when I saw them, 2 glinting eyes reflecting the flames. They were far apart, higher than any animal I could think of. The eyes didn't blink, didn't move, they just stared, and then slowly they disappeared, swallowed by the darkness. My heart was racing, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I wanted to run, but where would I go? The forest stretched for miles, and I didn't know what was out there, watching me. I stayed by the fire, every nerve on edge. Hours passed, though it felt like days. The laughter faded into silence, leaving me in a void of dread. I must have fallen asleep at some point because the next thing I knew, it was dawn. The fire had burned down to embers, and the forest was eerily quiet. I felt a brief surge of relief. Maybe it was over. Maybe it had all been a dream. But as I stood up, stretching my stiff limbs, I saw them. Tracks. In the dirt around my camp. They were unlike any tracks I'd ever seen. Long, narrow, with deep impressions where claws had dug into the earth. And they circled my tent, over and over again. I felt sick. This was no bear. This was something else, something that had been watching me, stalking me while I slept. I packed up as fast as I could, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I needed to get out of those woods, but as I turned to leave, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The tracks. They weren't leading away from my camp. They were leading into it, toward my tent. And then they just stopped, as if whatever had made them had vanished into thin air. I forced myself to start moving, pushing through the thick underbrush, my eyes scanning the trees for any sign of movement. The forest was still, unnaturally so, like it was holding its breath. I felt the presence again, the weight of unseen eyes on me. And then the whispering returned, louder, angrier. I broke into a run, branches whipping at my face as I tore through the woods. The whispering grew louder, turning into a cacophony of voices, all speaking in that strange, guttural language. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I kept running, desperate to escape. And then, out of nowhere, I tripped. I hit the ground hard, my head spinning as I tried to get up. That's when I saw it, standing just a few feet away, at the edge of a clearing. A figure, tall and gaunt, its limbs unnaturally long, its skin a mottled gray that seemed to blend with the shadows. Its face was obscured by darkness, but I could feel its gaze piercing through me. It didn't move. It just stood there, watching. I scrambled to my feet, heart hammering in my chest, and backed away slowly, never taking my eyes off the figure. But as I stepped back, I felt something behind me. I turned, expecting to see a tree, but there was nothing, just empty space. And then, I felt a cold hand grip my shoulder. I screamed, spinning around, knife in hand, but there was no one there. The figure in the clearing was gone. I stumbled backward, my head spinning with fear and confusion. What was happening? Where had it gone? I don't remember much after that. Somehow, I made it out of the forest. I don't know how. It was like I blacked out, my mind blocking out the horrors I had seen. When I finally emerged onto the road, I was covered in scratches and dirt, my clothes torn, my body trembling uncontrollably. I went straight to the nearest town, to the Cherokee elder who lived there. I told him everything, every terrifying detail. He listened silently, his expression grim. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "You have seen the Yitlunta," he said quietly. "The Spearfinger. It is an ancient spirit, one that has wandered these woods for centuries, seeking those who intrude upon its domain." I asked him how to get rid of it, how to send it back to wherever it had come from, but he just shook his head. "You cannot get rid of it," he replied. "It has chosen you. It will follow you until you show it respect, until you understand the ancient laws of the forest." I left his house that day, carrying a bundle of herbs he had given me and a warning. Offer your respect to the forest. Leave gifts at the edge of the woods. Pray for forgiveness. I have done everything he said. Every night, I burn the herbs and leave offerings, hoping that it will appease whatever I brought back with me. But the laughter, it hasn't stopped. It echoes through my house now, coming from the corners, from the shadows. And last night, I woke up to find claw marks on my bedroom wall. 4 deep gouges, glistening like fresh wounds. I feel it watching me, even now as I tell you this story. Its presence is here, just beyond the light, waiting. I don't know how much longer I have before it comes for me. I don't know what it wants, or if it can ever be satisfied. But if you ever find yourself in those woods, remember this: some legends are real, and some forests are better left undisturbed. If you hear the whispers, if you feel the cold hand of the forest closing in, run, and don't look back. Because once it has seen you, once it has chosen you,